in its strongest words yet,
至于你说到英国和欧盟也
China rejects calls for the release of 2 Canadians, instead suggesting the Western allies are hypocrites for expressing concerns over the detention of former diplomat Michael Kovrig and businessman Michael Spavor, but not speaking out against the arrest of Huawei's chief financial officer Meng Wanzhou.
This conflict has evolved into something not of Canada versus China, but of China versus the West, which is not in China's favor.
France became the latest country today joining the US, UK, Germany, and EU, expressing concern over Kovrig and Spavor's detainment. Speaking from Mali over the weekend, the Prime Minister continued to call for their release.
Canadians, quite frankly, and people around the world are extremely disturbed by the Chinese actions.
But those words have gone unanswered. The Canadian Chinese language broadcaster Fairchild TV quoted sources as saying Chinese officials have stepped up their interrogation efforts against Kovrig and Spavor in the hopes that the two will plead guilty to endangering national security. The Prime Minister has so far resisted calling the Chinese president, something this former Canadian diplomat says is the next step.
And he will have to essentially say, we demand that you release these 2 gentlemen immediately, and then there has to be a degree of or else.
If that doesn't work, he says Canada can withdraw its ambassador from Beijing back to Ottawa in protest, or even put sanctions on Chinese diplomats in Canada.
All of these actions would lead to a severe deterioration of relations between Canada and China.
It's a delicate balancing act that Canadian officials say they will work over the holidays to try and resolve. Olivia Stefanovic, CBC News, Toronto.
And it's not just government speaking out today. Newspapers of record in both the U.S. and China published scathing editorials. The New York Times editorial board came to Canada's defense and says Beijing is using hostage-taking to resolve economic and diplomatic disputes. It condemns China for being an aggressive rising power known to flout the rule of law and disregard human rights. An admittedly opposing perspective by the influential state-backed Chinese tabloid The Global Times. It vows that Canada will pay for its bad behavior, and attempts to resolve a conflict with China by roping in its allies will never work.